What happens when the one who holds every alpha's lifeline must decide if mercy has limits? When the woman who saved them all discovers that power doesn't heal the wounds carved into her soul, the sanctuary stands. The bonds hold. But 6 months of peace are about to shatter, and Alara will learn that forgiveness and survival are not the same thing. They say when you bleed on sacred ground, the earth remembers. When Alara Koi was dragged to the Bloodline altar, rejected, broken, left to die, she bled. And the earth didn't just remember. It awakened. What happened next shattered every alpha's world and proved that the weakest link can become the chain that binds them all. This is the story of a woman who died as prey and rose as power itself. The forest knew what was coming before Alara did. Birds fell silent in the canopy above. Small creatures burrowed deeper into their dens. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath as 4 wolves dragged a bloodied woman through the undergrowth, her body leaving a dark trail on the frost-covered ground. Alara Koi had stopped screaming an hour ago. Her throat was raw, her voice shredded to nothing. Now she only existed in a haze of pain, ribs broken, face swollen, every breath a fresh agony. The wolves hauling her forward didn't speak. What was there to say? They were following orders, and in Shadowcrest Pack, you didn't question the alpha. Even when the alpha was wrong, especially when he was your mate. The trees opened up ahead, revealing a clearing Alara had only heard about in whispered warnings. The Bloodline altar, ancient obsidian stone rising from the earth like a black tooth. Its surface carved with symbols older than memory. This was where shifters sent the condemned, where broken bonds went to die, where Alara would die tonight. If this story has sucked you in, if you're already feeling the cold dread of the harrowed and the bond break every alpha felt, then you know you need to hear the rest of their journey. Don't miss a single beat of this fated union. Please click the subscribe button right now and like this video so we can keep bringing you more thrilling stories. Now continue. Keel Shadowcrest stood at the clearing's edge in human form, arms crossed, face carved from ice. 3 years ago, the mate bond had snapped into place between them, with enough force to bring Alara to her knees. She'd felt his soul touch hers, had believed with every fiber of her being that she'd found her forever. She'd been 20 years old and stupid with hope. Now, at 23, she understood that forever was a lie alphas told when they wanted something. And the moment Keel decided he wanted something else, forever became nothing at all. Put her down. His voice carried across the clearing, flat and emotionless. The wolves obeyed, dropping Alara onto the frozen ground. She curled into herself instinctively, protecting her broken ribs, tasting copper and defeat. Keel approached slowly, boots crunching on frost. He crouched beside her, and for one desperate, pathetic moment, Alara thought she saw something flicker in his gray eyes. Regret, maybe. Guilt. Then it was gone, replaced by the cold distance that had defined their relationship for months. "You should have accepted it," he said quietly, "when I told you the mate bond was a mistake. When I explained that Lisa was better suited to be Luna, you should have stepped aside gracefully." Alara tried to speak, but only a rasping wheeze emerged. Her jaw might be broken. Hard to tell anymore when everything hurt. Instead, you fought. You complained to the Pack Council. You made a scene at the gathering. Keel's jaw tightened. "You embarrassed me, Alara, in front of the other alphas, in front of everyone. I fought because you're my mate," she wanted to scream. "Because the bond was real, even if you decided it wasn't. Because I loved you." But she couldn't speak, and even if she could, what would be the point? Keel had made his choice. Lysa, beautiful, strong, born into alpha bloodlines, would be his Luna. Alara was just an inconvenient obstacle to be removed. The Bloodline altar is where we sever what shouldn't have been bound. Keel stood, looking down at her with something that might have been pity if he were capable of the emotion. "Your blood on that stone will break our mate bond. You'll die, and I'll be free to bond with Lissa properly. It's cleaner this way." Cleaner. As if murder could be tidy if you used the right location. Keel nodded to his enforcers. "Put her on the altar." They lifted Ilara like she weighed nothing, carrying her to the obsidian stone. The surface was cold against her back, so cold it burned. Ancient carvings pressed into her skin through her torn clothes. She could feel power in the stone, something old and patient and watching. Keel produced a silver blade from his belt. Ceremonial, ornate, probably passed down through generations of Shadowcrest alphas who'd used this place for exactly this purpose. I, Keel Shadowcrest, Alpha of Shadowcrest Pack, do hereby sever the bond between myself and Ilara Koi. His voice took on a ritual cadence, words worn smooth by centuries of use. Let her blood sanctify this breaking. Let the altar bear witness. Let the bond be unmade. He raised the blade. Ilara closed her eyes. The knife came down, slicing across her forearm, deep, deliberate. Then again, across her other arm. Blood welled up, hot and fast, spilling onto the altar's surface. And the world changed. The obsidian stone began to glow. Faint at first, barely visible, then brighter. Silver light emanated from the carvings, pulsing in time with Ilara's racing heartbeat. The blood didn't pool. It was absorbed, drunk by the stone like earth soaking up rain. Keel stepped back, frowning. What? The light exploded outward. Ilara screamed as power surged through her body, burning along her veins, rewriting something fundamental in her very cells. The pain was worse than the beating, worse than the knife, worse than anything she'd ever experienced. It felt like dying and being born simultaneously, her body torn apart and reconstructed in the space between heartbeats. Images flooded her mind, memories that weren't hers. Women with silver marks covering their skin, standing at this very altar, their hands glowing with power. Bond keepers, her mind supplied, though she didn't know where the knowledge came from. They were called bond keepers, and they'd been hunted to extinction 200 years ago because the alphas feared them. Because the bond keepers controlled the bonds themselves. Ilara's back arched off the altar as silver marks erupted across her skin, intricate patterns that looked like living light, spreading from where her blood touched the stone, racing up her arms, across her chest, up her neck and face. Her blonde hair, limp and matted with blood moments before, began to glow, turned almost white in the altar's light. And then she felt them. Every alpha in a 100-mile radius, their pack bonds suddenly visible to her inner sight, like threads of light stretching across the darkness. 12 alphas, 12 territories, all connected through the ancient magic that bound shifter packs together. She felt Keel's bond to his pack most clearly, a thick cord of power linking him to over 300 shifters. She felt how it sustained him, how it made him strong, how every member of his pack fed into that connection. And she understood, with sudden perfect clarity, that she could sever it. If you're hooked, if you need to know what Ilara does with this devastating power, hit that subscribe button right now. Drop a like if you're already rooting for her to make every single alpha, whoever hurt someone, pay the price. This story is just beginning, and trust me, you don't want to miss what happens when the rejected mate becomes the one thing every alpha needs to survive. Ilara opened her eyes. They'd changed. No longer the soft brown they'd been her entire life, but silver, bright, inhuman silver, that reflected the altar's light. Bond keeper, someone whispered. One of the enforcers, his voice thick with terror. Keel was staring at her, all color drained from his face. No. That's impossible. They're extinct. They're dead? Ilara's voice came out different, layered, as if multiple people spoke through her mouth. She sat up slowly, the movement sending fresh blood streaming down her arms. But the pain was distant now, manageable, overshadowed by the power singing through her bones. You tried to make me dead too. Funny how that worked out. If this story has sucked you in, if you're already feeling the cold dread of the harrowed and the bond break every alpha felt, then you know you need to hear the rest of their journey. Don't miss a single beat of this fated union. Please click the subscribe button right now and like this video, so we can keep bringing you more thrilling stories like this. She slid off the altar, landing on unsteady feet. The enforcers backed away immediately, instinct overriding their training. You didn't fight a bondkeeper. The old stories were clear on that. Fighting a bondkeeper was like fighting the foundation of your own existence. But Keel held his ground. He was alpha, and alphas didn't show fear. Whatever you are, you're still on my territory. You still answer to me. Alara laughed, and the sound was sharp enough to cut. Do I? She reached out, not with her hand, but with her newly awakened power, and grasped the thread connecting Keel to his pack. And she pulled. Keel collapsed with a strangled cry, clutching his chest. In the distance, miles away back in Shadowcrest territory, Alara felt 300 shifters cry out in unison as their alpha's bond suddenly weakened. Not severed, not yet, but strained until it screamed. Keel looked up at her from his knees, eyes wide with shock and dawning horror. What are you doing? Showing you what power actually looks like. Alara took a step closer, and he flinched. The great Alpha Keel Shadowcrest flinched from his rejected mate. You brought me here to sever our bond. Congratulations, it's severed. But now you have a much bigger problem. She gestured at the glowing marks covering her skin. Every alpha in the region just felt what I did to you. They felt their bonds flicker. They felt their power waver. And they're terrified, because they know what I am, even if they'd thought we were extinct. Alara! Don't! The word cracked like a whip. You don't get to use my name. You lost that right when you decided I was disposable. Keel's throat worked. For the first time in 3 years, she saw real emotion on his face. Real fear. What do you want? It was such a simple question. What did she want? Revenge would be easy. One pull on that thread, and his bond would shatter. His pack would collapse. 300 shifters would lose the connection that made them whole, and Keel would die screaming as his alpha power tore itself apart. She could do it. Her fingers twitched with the desire to make him hurt the way she'd hurt. But something stopped her. Maybe the knowledge flooding her mind from the altar. Memories of bondkeepers who'd wielded their power with wisdom instead of vengeance. Maybe simple exhaustion. Maybe just the tiny voice in the back of her head that whispered, if she killed him now, she'd be no better than he was. I want you to suffer, she said finally. I want you to live with what you did. I want every day to be a reminder that you tried to murder your mate, and instead you awakened something that terrifies you. She released the thread, but didn't restore it fully. Left it weakened, damaged, a constant ache in Keel's chest that would never fully heal. Your bond is crippled now, Alara told him. Not broken, but damaged. Your pack will feel it. They'll know their alpha is weak, and you'll spend every moment of every day knowing I could finish what I started with a single thought. Keel stayed on his knees, breathing hard. The other alphas will come for me, I know. Alara turned away from him, looking at the altar that had transformed her. Let them come. We'll see if they're smarter than you were. She walked toward the forest, each step steadier than the last. The enforcers scrambled out of her path, nearly tripping over themselves in their haste to avoid her. Alara! Keel's voice stopped her at the clearing's edge. She didn't turn around. I'm sorry. Now she did turn, just her head, just enough to see him still kneeling in the dirt. No, you're not. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry it didn't work the way you planned. But you're not sorry you tried to kill me, and I'll never forgive you for that. She left him there and disappeared into the forest, following instinct towards something she could feel pulling at her consciousness. Other altars, other places of power, and, impossibly, other bondkeepers, hidden, sleeping, waiting to awaken. The world had changed tonight. The alphas just didn't know how much yet. But they would learn. Oh, they would learn. Alara walked until her legs gave out. The adrenaline that had carried her from the altar finally wore off, and she collapsed against a massive pine tree, sliding down until she sat with her back against rough bark. The silver marks still glowed on her skin, pulsing faintly with her heartbeat. They hurt now, or maybe she was just becoming aware of all her other injuries again. Hard to tell where one pain ended and another began. She touched her face carefully. Swollen, crusted with blood, her jaw definitely fractured. Her ribs ground together with every breath. The knife wounds on her arms had stopped bleeding, sealed by some property of the altar's magic, but the flesh around them was angry and inflamed. By all rights, she should be dead. Would be dead if infection set in, which seemed likely given she was sitting in a freezing forest wearing torn, bloody clothes. But the power humming beneath her skin suggested death wasn't quite ready for her yet. Alara closed her eyes and focused inward, exploring what she'd become. The bonds were the most obvious change. She could feel them like a new sense, threads of connection stretching across the landscape. Keel's damaged thread throbbed with pain. But there were others too. 11 more alphas, their bonds strong and healthy, linking them to their packs. She could name them now. Knowledge had come with the awakening, downloaded directly into her consciousness like someone had opened a book in her mind. Alpha Dominic of Blood Moon territory to the north. His bond felt stable, warm, well-maintained. A good alpha, the knowledge whispered, fair to his pack. Alpha Ravenna of Crescent Valley to the west. Her bond was strained but not damaged. Pulled thin by something. Illness in the pack, maybe. Or in her family. Alpha Casper of Dusk Plains to the south. His bond felt jagged, sharp-edged. Cruelty there, abuse. The kind of alpha who ruled through fear and called it strength. The others were farther away, their bonds fainter in her perception. But she could reach them if she wanted. Could touch them, test them, sever them if necessary. The weight of that responsibility settled on her shoulders like a physical thing. She wasn't just Alara anymore. Rejected Omega, disposable mate, murdered woman who hadn't stayed dead. She was a bondkeeper now, and that meant something. Meant responsibility for every shifter in her range. Not just the alphas, but the thousands of pack members whose lives depended on those bonds staying healthy. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered to the darkness. "Grandmother, if you're listening, I could really use some help right now." Her grandmother. The memory surfaced slowly, reluctantly. She'd died when Alara was 16, and no one had spoken much about her after. Just vague comments about how she'd always been strange, how she'd lived alone in the forest, how she'd made people uncomfortable. Now Alara wondered if her grandmother had known. If she'd been hiding bondkeeper blood, protecting her granddaughter by keeping secrets, waiting for an awakening that came too late to save her, but just in time to save Alara. A pendant. Her grandmother had given her a pendant on her deathbed, pressed it into Alara's palm, with fingers gone cold and weak. "Keep this hidden," she'd gasped. "Never let anyone see. Promise me." Alara had promised. Had worn the pendant on a chain around her neck, tucked beneath her clothes where no one would notice. It was still there now, cold against her sternum. She pulled it out with shaking fingers. Simple silver disc, carved with symbols that matched the marks now covering her skin. Bondkeeper symbols. Protection, maybe. Or a beacon, calling to the altar when her blood finally touched it. "You knew," Alara breathed. "You knew what I was, and you hid it. Why?" The forest offered no answers. Just wind and darkness, and the distant sound of something howling. Alara struggled to her feet, using the tree for support. She couldn't stay here. Other predators would smell the blood, and she was in no condition to defend herself, even with new power thrumming through her veins. She needed shelter, water, medical attention if such a thing was possible. The bond flared suddenly. Not Keel's damaged thread, but another one. Someone reaching out, searching. She felt the questing touch like fingers brushing against her consciousness, tentative and curious. Alpha Dominic. He'd felt what happened at the altar, and now he was looking for the source. Alara could ignore it, could shield herself and disappear into the forest. But something made her reach back, accepting the connection. His surprise blazed through the bond like fire. Bondkeeper. The word wasn't spoken aloud, but transmitted through their link. "We thought you were myth." "So did I," Alara sent back. "Turns out we were both wrong." Where are you? Why? Planning to finish what Keel started? A pulse of negation, almost insulted. Planning to help if you'll allow it. Bond keepers are sacred. Any alpha who harms one forfeits their right to rule. Tell that to Keel, I will. Grim determination colored the sending, along with several other choice words. But first, tell me where you are. You're injured. I can feel it through our bond. Alara hesitated. Trust didn't come easy anymore, might never come easy again. But she was alone, hurt, and lost in a forest that would kill her by morning if she didn't find help. She sent him an image. The massive pine tree, the distinctive rock formation nearby, the general direction she'd traveled from the altar. Stay there, Dominic commanded. I'm coming. The bond went quiet, but she could still feel him, moving fast, covering ground with the speed only an alpha in wolf form could manage. He'd be there within the hour. Alara sank back down against the tree and tried not to think about how this could be another trap, how Dominic might arrive with a dozen wolves to finish the job Keel had started, how her newly awakened power might not be enough to save her if an entire pack decided she was too dangerous to live. But the alternative was freezing to death alone in the dark, and that felt too much like letting Keel win. So she waited, and watched the silver marks pulse on her skin, and tried not to let fear overwhelm the fragile hope that maybe, one alpha in this god-forsaken world might actually keep his word. The howl came first, announcing his arrival. Then the sound of paws on frozen ground, fast and purposeful. Alara tensed, preparing to run or fight or do whatever futile thing she could manage with a broken body and untested power. A massive gray wolf burst through the undergrowth and stopped short when he saw her. For a moment, they just stared at each other, Alara bleeding against the tree, Dominic standing a respectful distance away, breath steaming in the cold air. Then he shifted. The transformation was fluid, practiced, over in seconds. He straightened, and Alara found herself looking at a man in his mid-30s, broad-shouldered and scarred, completely unconcerned about his nudity. Most shifters weren't. Modesty was hard to maintain when you changed forms regularly. But Alara looked away anyway, some ingrained habit of propriety asserting itself despite everything. Easy, Dominic said, voice pitched low and soothing. I'm not here to hurt you. I swear it on my pack's bond. That meant something, coming from an alpha. Swearing on the pack bond was as serious as oaths got. Alara forced herself to meet his eyes. They were amber, wolf eyes that didn't entirely change back to human. Why are you here? Because a bond keeper awakened, and every alpha with sense is either terrified or grateful. He took a slow step closer, hands visible and empty. I'm trying for grateful. You felt what I did to Keel. Everyone felt it. His bond screamed loud enough to wake the dead. Another careful step. You could have killed him. Probably should have, considering he tried to kill you first. But you didn't. That shows restraint, wisdom. Or weakness. No. Firm, certain. Killing him would have been easy. Letting him live with the consequences takes real strength. He was close enough now to see the full extent of her injuries, and something dark flickered across his face. Goddess above, what did he do to you? Beat me, cut me, threw me on the altar expecting me to die. Alara's voice was flat, reciting facts. Turns out the altar had other plans. Dominic's jaw tightened. I'm going to kill him. Get in line. That surprised a rough laugh out of him. Then he sobered, gesturing to her injuries. I need to get you medical attention. Can you walk? Not well. Then I'll carry you. He moved forward, but Alara flinched instinctively, and he froze. Understanding dawned in his expression. You don't trust me. I don't trust anyone anymore. Fair enough. He took a step back, giving her space. But you're going to die out here if you don't accept help. And I didn't run halfway across my territory in the middle of the night just to watch a bondkeeper bleed out from stubbornness. Alara studied him, trying to see past her fear to the truth underneath. The bond between them thrummed steadily. Healthy, strong, no deception that she could sense. He seemed genuinely concerned, genuinely trying to help, and she was so tired of hurting. "Okay," she whispered, "but if you try anything, you'll snap my bond like a twig." "I know." He approached carefully, telegraphing every movement. "I'm going to pick you up now. Tell me if anything hurts worse." He slid one arm beneath her knees, the other around her back, and lifted her as gently as if she were made of glass. Everything hurt worse, but Ilara bit down on the scream and just nodded. "My territory's an hour north," Dominic said, already moving. "I have a healer there, best in the region. She'll patch you up, no questions asked." "There will be questions. Then I'll answer them. You just focus on not dying." His grip shifted slightly, more secure. "And for what it's worth, I'm sorry. For what Keel did, for what you've been through, for all of it. The Alphas have gotten too comfortable with our power. We've forgotten what we're supposed to be." "What's that?" "Protectors, not tyrants." He picked up speed, moving with the sure-footed grace of someone who knew these forests intimately. "The bond keepers kept us honest once. Maybe it's time that came back." Ilara let her head rest against his shoulder, too exhausted to hold it up anymore. The steady rhythm of his movement and the warmth of his body heat against the cold night air made her eyes drift closed despite her best efforts to stay alert. The last thing she heard before unconsciousness claimed her was Dominic's voice, quiet and fierce. "You're safe now, I promise. And when you're healed, we're going to make damn sure every Alpha knows what it costs to hurt a bond keeper." Then darkness took her, and for the first time in days, Ilara slept without dreaming of death. She woke to warmth and softness, and the sharp, clean smell of medicinal herbs. For a moment, Ilara forgot everything: the rejection, the beating, the altar, the awakening. She was just comfortable, floating in that peaceful space between sleep and waking, where nothing hurt and nothing mattered. Then memory crashed back, and she jerked upright with a gasp. "Easy, easy!" Hands pressed gently on her shoulders, guiding her back down. "You're safe. You're in Blood Moon territory. I'm Mira, the pack healer." Ilara blinked, vision swimming into focus. She was in a bed, an actual bed with clean sheets and a thick quilt. The room around her was small but comfortable, lit by soft lamplight. And the woman leaning over her was middle-aged with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a practical braid. "How long?" Ilara's voice came out raspy. "2 days. You've been in and out, mostly out." Mira moved to a side table, preparing something that smelled like mint and willow bark. "Your injuries were extensive. Fractured jaw, 4 broken ribs, internal bleeding, severe lacerations. You should have been dead." "I was supposed to be." "Well, you're remarkably stubborn about staying alive." Mira returned with a cup of steaming liquid. "Drink this. It'll help with the pain." Ilara accepted the cup with shaking hands and sipped carefully. The tea was bitter but warming, spreading through her chest like liquid heat. "Where's Dominic?" "Dealing with the situation. Every Alpha within 100 miles has been trying to reach him since you arrived. Words spread about what you are." "Bondkeeper." "Yes." Mira sat on the edge of the bed, expression serious. "I'm old enough to remember the stories my grandmother told, about how bondkeepers could make or break an Alpha with a thought, how they kept the packs balanced, stopped tyrants from rising, protected the weak from the strong." "That's a lot of pressure to put on one person." "It is. But you're not one person anymore. Are you?" Mira gestured to the silver marks visible on Ilara's arms above the blanket. "You're something more now, something necessary." Ilara looked down at the marks, tracing their patterns with her eyes. They'd faded slightly while she slept, no longer glowing, but they were clearly permanent. A visible reminder of what she'd become, impossible to hide. "I don't know how to be this," she admitted quietly. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do." "You'll figure it out, and you'll have help." Mira stood, straightening the blanket. "Alpha Dominic has called for a gathering. All 12 regional Alphas. He's invoking ancient law, demanding they come to the Bloodline altar in 3 days' time. Alara's stomach dropped. Why? Because a bondkeeper has awakened, and that changes everything. The power structure of the entire shifter world just shifted, and everyone needs to understand their place in the new order. Mira's expression was gentle but firm. They're all coming, Alara, including Keel. Of course. Of course Keel would be there, forced to face what he'd created when he tried to destroy her. I can't, Alara whispered. I'm not ready. I don't know how to. You'll learn. You have 3 days. Mira squeezed her shoulder. Rest now. Heal. And when you're strong enough, we'll start preparing you for what comes next. The 3 days passed too quickly, and not quickly enough. Alara healed with supernatural speed, the bondkeeper power accelerating her body's natural processes. By the 2nd day, she could walk without pain. By the 3rd, the marks on her face had faded to faint bruises, and her ribs no longer ground together with every breath. Mira said it was unprecedented, said most shifters would take weeks to recover from injuries like hers. But Alara wasn't most shifters anymore. Dominic visited daily, always respectful, always careful to maintain distance until she invited him closer. They talked about the bonds, about alpha politics, about what she could expect when the gathering happened. He explained how the old bondkeeper system had worked, pulling information from texts preserved in his pack's library, books most alphas had tried to destroy, but a few had secretly kept. They were feared, Dominic told her, sitting across from her in Mira's healing room while rain drummed against the windows. But they were also respected, revered even, because they didn't just control the bonds, they maintained them. When an alpha died or stepped down, the bondkeeper would facilitate the transfer of power. When packs needed to merge or split, the bondkeeper would restructure the bonds. And when alphas abused their power, the bondkeeper would strip it away. His expression was grave. That's why the purge happened 2 centuries ago. A coalition of corrupt alphas realized they could never consolidate absolute power as long as bondkeepers existed. So they hunted them down systematically, killed them and their families, burned the knowledge, destroyed the texts, rewrote history until most shifters believed bondkeepers were just myths. But some families survived. Hidden, diluted. Your grandmother must have known what you were, or suspected it. The pendant she gave you, that's old magic. Protective. It probably kept your bondkeeper blood dormant until the right moment. Or the desperate one. Alara touched the pendant still hanging around her neck. If Keel hadn't tried to kill me, if I hadn't bled on the altar, then you might have lived your whole life never knowing what you were, and the shifter world would have continued down a path toward complete alpha tyranny. Dominic leaned forward. What happened was terrible, but maybe it was also necessary. Alara wanted to argue, to rage against the idea that her suffering had purpose, but she couldn't deny the truth in his words. On the morning of the 3rd day, Dominic brought her clothes. Not the torn, bloodied rags she'd arrived in, but proper garments, simple but well-made, in shades of silver and white. Traditional bondkeeper colors, he explained. I had them commissioned from the pack's seamstress. She worked through the night. Alara ran her fingers over the soft fabric. The outfit consisted of fitted pants, a long tunic that fell to mid-thigh, and a sleeveless overcoat that would display the marks on her arms. Practical enough for movement, formal enough for ceremony. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You might hate me after today. Dominic's expression turned serious. The alphas won't all react well to your existence. Some will embrace the return of bondkeeper law. Others will see you as a threat to be eliminated. Can they eliminate me? Physically? Probably not without destroying themselves in the process. But they can make your life difficult. They can refuse to cooperate, can spread dissent among their packs, can try to undermine your authority through politics and manipulation. So I need to establish dominance immediately. Yes. And that means... He hesitated. That means you need to be prepared to follow through on your threats. If an alpha challenges you and you back down, you've lost all credibility. You're saying I might have to kill someone today. I'm saying you need to be willing to. Whether you actually do it depends on how stupid they are. Ilara dressed slowly, each piece of clothing feeling like armor being donned. When she looked in the mirror Mira provided, she barely recognized herself. The silver marks on her skin seemed to glow against the pale fabric. Her white blonde hair fell loose around her shoulders, making her look ethereal, otherworldly. She looked like power. Now she just had to figure out how to wield it. The journey to the Bloodline altar took most of the morning. Dominic drove while Ilara sat in the passenger seat, watching the forest roll past and trying to ignore the anxiety clawing at her chest. She could feel the alphas converging, their bonds growing stronger in her awareness as they approached. Keel's damaged thread throbbed like an infected wound. "He's terrified," Dominic observed, clearly sensing her focus. "Good. He should be." They arrived at the clearing as noon sun broke through the clouds. The altar stood as it had 3 nights ago, obsidian surface gleaming, but now it was surrounded by alphas. 11 of them. Keel hadn't arrived yet. They turned as one when Dominic's vehicle pulled up, their attention fixing on Ilara with an intensity that made her skin prickle. She could feel their emotions through the bonds: curiosity, fear, calculation, hope. Each alpha was processing what her existence meant for their power, their territory, their future. Dominic opened her door, offering his hand. Ilara took it, grateful for the steadying presence as she stepped out onto ground still stained with her blood. "Alphas of the 12 territories," Dominic announced, his voice carrying with alpha authority. "I present to you Ilara Coy, awakened bondkeeper of the Bloodline altar." Silence, heavy and expectant. Then one of the alphas stepped forward, a tall woman with silver streaking through her dark hair, her face marked by old scars. Alpha Zara of Iron Ridge territory. 3 nights ago, every alpha felt a bond nearly shatter, Zara said, her voice measured. "We felt our connections waver, felt our power question itself." "Was that you?" "That was me." Ilara forced her voice steady. "Alpha Keel Shadowcrest brought me to this altar to kill me and sever our mate bond. Instead, I awakened, and I showed him what it costs to try to murder a bondkeeper." Murmurs rippled through the assembled alphas, some approving, others worried. Another alpha pushed forward, young, aggressive, his bond feeling sharp and unstable. Alpha Magnus of Storm Peak. "You expect us to just accept this? To bow to some Omega who claims ancient power?" "I don't claim anything. I am a bondkeeper. The altar recognized me. The bonds answer to me." Ilara met his gaze without flinching. "And I can prove it, if you need convincing." "Big talk for someone who—" She reached out and grasped his bond thread. Just held it, didn't pull or sever. Retrius continue. 2 just let him feel the connection. Let him understand that she could end him with a thought. Magnus went rigid, eyes going wide. His aggression evaporated, replaced by pure instinctive terror. "I could snap this," Ilara said quietly, her voice carrying across the sudden silence. "Your bond would shatter, your pack would collapse, and you would die screaming. Or I could restrict it, cripple it, leave you alive but weakened for the rest of your days." She released the thread, and Magnus stumbled backward. "But I'm not here to destroy. I'm here to restore balance." "Balance!" A new voice, soft and thoughtful. Alpha Ravenna of Crescent Valley stepped forward, her expression cautious but not hostile. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means the age of alpha tyranny is over. It means bond keepers will oversee the pack structure again, ensuring bonds remain healthy and alphas serve their packs instead of ruling them like dictators." Ilara turned slowly, making eye contact with each alpha. "It means accountability." "And who holds you accountable?" This from an older alpha, Casper of Dusk Plains, his tone challenging but not overtly aggressive. "The bonds themselves. I can feel every pack member through their alpha's connection. If I abuse my power, if I become the tyrant I'm trying to prevent, the bonds will rebel. the altar will reject me. She touched the obsidian stone. This power comes with built-in checks. The bond keepers of old understood that, and so do I. Pretty words, Casper said. But we only have your promise that you'll use this power responsibly. No, you have something better. Alara spread her arms, and the silver marks on her skin began to glow faintly. You have the bonds themselves. Every alpha here can feel their connection to me. You know I'm telling the truth because the bonds don't lie. They can't lie. It was a gamble. She was still learning the extent of her abilities, still discovering what was possible. But the knowledge downloaded from the altar whispered that she was right. The bonds carried truth, made deception impossible in matters of fundamental intent. She felt the shift in the clearing as the alphas reached out through their connections, testing what she'd said. Their expressions changed one by one. Surprise, understanding, reluctant acceptance. She's right, Zara said finally. I can feel it. The bond confirms her intent. This is insane, Magnus muttered, but his earlier aggression was gone, replaced by wary resignation. The sound of an approaching vehicle cut through the conversation. Everyone turned toward the forest road as a familiar SUV rolled into the clearing. Keel. Alara's heart clenched despite her best efforts to remain impassive. 3 days hadn't been enough time to prepare for this. 3 years wouldn't have been enough. He climbed out slowly, moving like a man twice his age. The damage to his bond showed in his physical bearing. Shoulders hunched, face drawn, the visible scars across his skin even more pronounced. His gray eyes found her immediately, and something complicated flickered in their depths. Guilt. Fear. And underneath it all, a desperate hope that made Alara's stomach turn. Bondkeeper. He inclined his head, the gesture stiff and formal. Thank you for allowing me to attend. I didn't allow anything. This gathering was called by Alpha Dominic, and ancient law requires all regional alphas to attend when a bondkeeper awakens. Her voice was ice. But since you're here, why don't you explain to everyone why you brought your mate to this altar 3 nights ago? Keel's jaw tightened. That's between us. No, it's between you and every shifter whose alpha thinks they can murder inconvenient mates without consequence. Alara took a step toward him. Tell them, Keel. Tell them how you rejected our mate bond because I wasn't alpha-born. Tell them how you chose Lissa instead, even though the mate bond is supposed to be sacred. Tell them how you had your enforcers beat me unconscious and drag me here to bleed out on this stone. The other alphas were watching with various expressions of shock and disgust. Even those who'd seemed skeptical of Alara before were now looking at Keel like he was something they'd scraped off their shoes. The mate bond was a mistake, Keel said, but his voice lacked conviction. It happens sometimes. Wrong pairings. I was trying to fix it. By killing me. By severing it properly. You wouldn't accept the rejection. You kept fighting it, kept causing problems. Because you're my mate. The words tore from Alara's throat before she could stop them. Because the bond was real, even if you decided it wasn't convenient enough for your ambitions. You were weak, Omega-born, no alpha bloodline, no political connections. I needed a Luna who could strengthen the pack, not someone disposable. Alara's voice dropped to something dangerous. That's what I was to you, wasn't it? Disposable, forgettable, not worth the effort of honoring a sacred bond. Keel didn't answer. Couldn't, probably, because they both knew she was right. Here's what's going to happen, Alara said, addressing all the alphas now. Keel's bond will remain damaged, not as punishment, though he deserves worse, but as a lesson. Every alpha here will feel it through their connection to me. They'll be reminded daily that abusing your position, hurting those weaker than you, treating pack members as disposable resources, it all has consequences now. She turned her attention to Ravenna. Your daughter is sick. Ravenna's composure cracked. How did you? I can feel it through your bond. The strain, the fear, the desperation. Alara approached her slowly. The illness is affecting your connection to your pack. If it gets worse, if she dies, your bond will weaken. You could lose your ability to lead. The healers have tried everything. Ravenna's voice was thick with unshed tears. Nothing works. She's fading, and I can't stop it. Alara reached out, not with her hand, but with her power, touching the thread that connected Ravenna to her pack. She could feel the sickness now, like a dark spot on an otherwise healthy bond. But underneath it, she sensed something else, a weakness in the bond itself, a flaw that was making the child vulnerable. "Give me your hand," Alara said. Ravenna extended her hand without hesitation. Desperate mothers didn't question potential miracles. Alara grasped it and closed her eyes, diving deep into the bond structure. This was different from manipulating threads. This was healing, repairing, strengthening what had weakened. She'd never attempted it before, but the knowledge was there in her blood, in the marks on her skin, in the power gifted by the altar. She pulled power from the obsidian stone behind her, channeling it through herself and into Ravenna's bond. The thread brightened, thickened, the dark spot of illness shrinking and then vanishing entirely. When Alara opened her eyes, Ravenna was crying. "She's sleeping," Ravenna whispered. "For the first time in weeks, she's sleeping peacefully. I can feel it. The fever's breaking. She's going to be okay." "Your bond was damaged during childbirth. It created a vulnerability that let sickness take hold." Alara released Ravenna's hand. "I've repaired it. She'll be fine now." Ravenna sank to her knees. "Thank you. Thank you. I'll serve you however you need. I'll just be a good alpha. Protect your pack, especially the vulnerable ones." Alara helped her stand. "That's all I ask." The shift in the clearing's atmosphere was palpable. Several alphas who'd been watching with skepticism now looked at Alara with something approaching reverence. She'd just demonstrated that Bondkeeper power wasn't only about punishment. It could heal, could help, could make them stronger. "Who else is hiding problems?" Alara asked, scanning the assembled alphas. "Whose bonds are damaged or strained? Be honest. I can feel most of it anyway, but I'd rather you told me voluntarily." Silence. Then, slowly, an older alpha raised his hand. Thaddeus of Iron Ridge, his face weathered and his bond feeling thin, stretched. "My age is catching up with me," he admitted. "The bond isn't what it used to be. I've been considering stepping down, but there's no clear successor." "Let me see." She examined his bond and found the problem immediately: decades of wear without proper maintenance. The old bondkeepers would have performed regular upkeep, but with none alive for 2 centuries, the bonds had been slowly deteriorating across all territories. It took 20 minutes, but Alara managed to reinforce Thaddeus's bond, restoring much of its former strength. Not perfect, his age was a factor she couldn't entirely overcome, but better. Functional. "That should buy you a few more years," she told him. "Use them to train a proper successor. When you're ready to step down, I'll facilitate the bond transfer." Others came forward then. Not all of them, not the ones too proud or too worried about showing weakness. But enough. Alara worked through the afternoon, examining bonds, making repairs, offering advice on pack management that the bonds themselves suggested. And through it all, Keel stood apart, watching with an expression she couldn't read. By evening, Alara was exhausted. The work had drained her more than she'd expected, and her legs felt shaky. Dominic appeared at her elbow with a camp chair, and she sank into it gratefully. "You did well," he said quietly. "You showed them you're not just a threat. You're a resource." "I showed them I'm useful. That's different from acceptance." "It's a start." The alphas were dispersing now, preparing to return to their territories. But one remained, one whose presence Alara had been trying to ignore all day. Keel approached slowly, like someone approaching a wild animal. When he was close enough to speak without shouting, he stopped. "May I have a word?" "No." Alara didn't look at him. "Please, just 5 minutes." "You had 3 years to talk to me, Keel. 3 years to see me as something more than an inconvenience. You don't get to ask for 5 minutes now." I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking anyway. He moved closer, and she finally looked at him. Really looked, for the first time since he'd arrived. He looked terrible. The scars were worse than she'd realized. Silver marks that mirrored her own, but twisted, damaged. A visible reminder of his broken bond. He'd lost weight, his clothes hanging loose on a frame that had once been solidly muscled. And his eyes. They held a desperate, haunted quality that suggested sleep was a stranger. You're suffering, Alara observed. Every moment of every day. No self-pity in the admission, just fact. The bond screams at me constantly. My pack feels it too. We're weaker, unstable. Shifters are leaving, joining other territories, because they don't trust an alpha with a crippled bond. And you want me to fix it. He swallowed hard. I want to apologize, properly. Not because I expect forgiveness or healing or anything else. Just because you deserve to hear it. Alara studied him. Through their connection, she could feel his sincerity. Whatever else Keel was, he wasn't lying right now. 5 minutes, she said finally. But not here. Not with an audience. She stood, gestured toward the forest path. They walked in silence until the clearing was out of sight. Until it was just the two of them, and the weight of everything broken between them. I was wrong, Keel said finally. About everything. You were my mate, my true mate, and I threw that away because I was too proud and too stupid to see what I had. Why? The question came out smaller than she'd intended. Why wasn't I enough? You were always enough, but I was raised believing that alpha bloodlines mattered, that political connections were more important than mate bonds, that strength meant power instead of character. He turned to face her. My father chose a political match over his true mate. It destroyed him slowly, but he died as one of the most powerful alphas in the region. That's what I thought I wanted. And now? Now I understand that power without foundation is just waiting to collapse. You were my foundation, Alara, and I destroyed you because I couldn't see it. She wanted to stay angry, wanted to hold on to the rage that had sustained her through 3 years of rejection and abuse. But standing here, looking at what her awakening had done to him, feeling his genuine remorse through the bond. I can't forgive you, she said quietly. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I know. But I won't let you destroy yourself either. Your pack needs you functional, even if they deserve better than you. She reached out, touching the bond thread between them. I'll repair it, partially. Enough that you can lead without constant pain. But it won't be what it was. You'll always bear the mark of what you did. That's more than I deserve. Yes, it is. She worked on the bond, carefully reinforcing the damaged sections while leaving visible scars. He needed to remember. They both did. When she finished, Keel gasped, his hand going to his chest. The pain, it's gone. Not entirely, but most of it. Don't make me regret this, Alara warned. If you hurt anyone else the way you hurt me, I will finish what I started at the altar. Understand? I understand. He hesitated, then. For what it's worth, I loved you. I just didn't know how to value what love meant until I'd lost it. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard. Alara turned away, heading back toward the clearing. Go home, Keel. Be better. That's all I ask. She left him standing alone in the forest, and she didn't look back. When she emerged into the clearing, only Dominic remained. He took one look at her face and didn't ask questions, just opened the vehicle door and waited. Take me somewhere quiet, Alara said. Somewhere I can think. I know just the place. They drove in silence while the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Dominic took them to a ridge overlooking his territory, miles of forest stretching into the distance, dotted with lights from pack homes. This is where I come when the weight gets too heavy, he said, leaning against the vehicle's hood. Helps to remember that I'm not carrying it alone, that every light down there is someone living their life, depending on me, but also supporting me. Ilara joined him, looking out over the view. Through the bonds, she could feel all of them. Thousands of shifters across 12 territories, their lives interconnected through threads of power she was only beginning to understand. I thought power would feel different, she admitted. Bigger, more certain. Instead, it just feels like responsibility I don't know how to carry. That's what makes you the right person for it. Dominic's shoulder bumped against hers gently. The ones who crave power are always the ones who shouldn't have it. The ones who fear it, who feel its weight, they're the ones who use it wisely. I healed Keel's bond. I know, I felt it. He didn't deserve it. Probably not, but his pack did. You made the choice that helped the most people, even though it cost you personally. Dominic turned to look at her. That's what bond keepers do. They make the hard choices so others don't have to. Ilara let out a long breath, watching it mist in the cold evening air. I don't know if I can do this. You already are. They stood in silence as stars began to emerge overhead, and Ilara felt the bonds pulse around her like a vast heartbeat. She'd died 3 days ago, or close enough, and awakened as something new, something powerful and terrifying and necessary. The woman Keel had tried to destroy no longer existed. In her place stood a bondkeeper, marked by ancient magic and responsible for thousands of lives. And somehow, despite everything, that felt right. Come on, Dominic said eventually. You need food and rest. Tomorrow we start the real work. What real work? Building the new order, establishing protocols, making sure every alpha understands their place in the new structure. He smiled slightly. You didn't think today was the end, did you? It's just the beginning. Ilara laughed, surprised she still could. You know how to motivate a person. I try. They drove back to Blood Moon territory, and Ilara watched the forest roll past, feeling the bonds hum beneath her skin. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new problems, new alphas testing her authority. But tonight, she was alive. She was powerful. She was exactly what the shifter world needed, even if they didn't all realize it yet. And Keel, the alpha who'd tried to throw her away, would spend the rest of his life knowing that his greatest mistake had become everyone else's salvation. Sometimes, Ilara thought, justice wasn't about punishment. It was about transformation, about taking the worst thing that ever happened to you and turning it into the exact thing the world needed. She'd bled on the Bloodline altar, expecting to die. Instead, she'd been reborn. And nothing would ever be the same. The weeks that followed the gathering were a blur of activity. Alphas visited the Bloodline altar regularly now, seeking Ilara's counsel on everything from territory disputes to pack management. She heard cases of abuse, intervened when necessary, and slowly began establishing the framework for what bondkeeper oversight actually looked like in practice. Dominic became her unofficial advisor, his steady presence and political savvy helping her navigate situations where power alone wasn't enough. They worked well together, his practical experience balancing her instinctive understanding of the bonds. Other bondkeepers began awakening across distant territories, their bloodlines responding to Ilara's emergence like dominoes falling. She reached out through the bonds, made contact, began teaching them what she'd learned. The knowledge from the altar flowed more easily now, as if her own awakening had unlocked channels that had been closed for centuries. Keel kept his distance. He sent supplies for the sanctuary being built around the altar, contributed resources without being asked, and by all accounts was treating his pack better than he had in years. Whether that came from genuine change or simple fear of consequences, Ilara didn't know and tried not to care. But she felt him through the bond every day. Felt his regret, his longing, his desperate wish to undo what couldn't be undone. She ignored it as best she could. Casper of Dusk Plains pushed boundaries, testing her authority with subtle defiance. She restricted his bond twice before he finally got the message, and even then she could feel his resentment simmering beneath compliance. Magnus of Storm Peak, surprisingly, became one of her strongest supporters after the initial confrontation. He'd been ruling through aggression because that's what he'd been taught. But under Bondkeeper guidance, he discovered he could lead through respect instead. Ravenna's daughter thrived, and the Alpha of Crescent Valley became Alara's most vocal advocate, spreading word among the packs that the Bondkeeper had saved her child's life. But it was Zara who provided the most valuable insight one evening, sitting with Alara at the altar, while moonlight painted everything silver. "You're building something that hasn't existed in 200 years, the scarred Alpha said thoughtfully. A power structure where Alphas serve instead of rule. Where the strongest among us are held accountable by something greater than pack loyalty or territorial might." "Is that good or bad?" Ilara asked. "It's necessary, but it's also dangerous." Zara's expression was serious. "There will be Alphas who can't accept it, who would rather die than submit to oversight. And there will be pack members who see you as a usurper, who believe the old ways were better, even if they suffered under them." "So what do I do?" "Exactly what you're doing. Stay consistent. Stay fair. Show them that Bondkeeper rule benefits everyone, not just the powerful." Zara paused. "And be prepared to make examples when necessary. Mercy is good, but mercy without teeth is just weakness wearing a kind face." The words proved prophetic sooner than Alara expected. It happened 6 weeks after the initial gathering. A young Omega named Lissa arrived at the altar, beaten and terrified, fleeing an Alpha who'd been abusing her for months. The Alpha, Garrett of Stormridge territory, followed within days, demanding her return and claiming authority over his pack members. That was when Alara learned that rebuilding the world sometimes meant breaking it first. The confrontation was brutal, public, and necessary. She stripped Garrett of his Alpha title, transferred his power to a more worthy successor, and exiled him from Shifter society entirely. It sent shockwaves through all 12 territories. The message was clear. The new order had teeth. Bondkeepers wouldn't tolerate the old abuses, wouldn't accept tradition as justification for cruelty. Some Alphas embraced the change wholeheartedly. Others complied resentfully, their bonds constantly monitored for signs of backsliding. And through it all, Alara stood at the center of an ever-expanding web of silver threads, feeling thousands of lives pulse through her awareness, carrying a responsibility that would have crushed her 6 months ago. But she wasn't the woman she'd been 6 months ago. That woman had died on the Bloodline altar, rejected and broken. The woman who rose in her place was something else entirely. 6 months after her awakening, Alara stood at the altar as dawn broke, just as she did every morning. The sanctuary had grown around the obsidian stone, simple wooden buildings forming a crescent, housing shifters from various packs who'd chosen to live here permanently. The place had acquired a name among shifters, the Heart, where all pack bonds originated, where the Bondkeeper maintained the balance, where even the smallest Omega could seek justice from the most powerful Alpha. Alara had grown into her power like a tree sending roots deep into rich earth. The silver marks were permanent now, glowing faintly even when she wasn't actively using her abilities. Her white blonde hair flowed loose always, marking her as separate from any pack tradition. She wore the silver-white robes that had become her uniform, simple and practical, and unmistakably Bondkeeper. She was no longer Alara Coy, rejected mate and disposable Omega. She was the Bondkeeper, and that meant everything. Regular visitors came daily, Alphas for monthly mandatory gatherings, pack members seeking mediation, young shifters seeking wisdom. The sanctuary thrummed with constant activity. Yet Alara made time each dawn to stand alone at the altar, feeling the bonds pulse with morning light. This morning, though, she wasn't quite alone. "You should sleep more," Dominic said, approaching from the main building. 6 months of working together had made them comfortable in each other's presence, their bond the strongest and clearest of all her Alpha connections. "I sleep enough." Alara didn't turn, still watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and rose. 4 hours a night isn't enough for anyone, even bond keepers. He moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth, but maintaining the respectful distance they'd established. You're going to burn out. I can't afford to burn out. Too many people depend on me. Which is why you need to take care of yourself. His tone was gentle but firm. You're not helping anyone if you collapse from exhaustion. Ilara finally looked at him. Dominic had become essential to her work over these months. Advisor, friend, the one person who seemed to understand the weight of responsibility without trying to take it from her. Trust came hard after what Keel had done, but somehow she'd learned to trust Dominic. I'll try to rest more, she conceded. I've heard that before. She smiled slightly. This time, I mean it. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sanctuary wake up. Smoke began rising from chimneys as breakfast was prepared. Shifters emerged from buildings, going about their morning routines. There's something you should know, Dominic said eventually. Keel has requested a formal visit. He wants permission to come to the sanctuary and speak with you. Ilara's stomach tightened. She'd managed to avoid direct contact with her former mate for 6 months, communicating only through official channels when absolutely necessary. The thought of seeing him face to face again. When? In a month. He's formally petitioned, following all proper protocols. You can refuse, but that sets a precedent that the bond keeper plays favorites. Ilara sighed. I can't refuse without good reason. No, but you can limit the visit. Specify time, location, witnesses. He'll want to apologize again. Maybe beg me to restore his bond fully. Through their connection, she could feel Keel's desperation, his desperate need to somehow make things right. Probably. But you don't owe him anything beyond hearing him out. Dominic's expression was serious. Don't let guilt make you question your decisions. You chose mercy when you could have chosen vengeance. That's enough. Was it? Ilara wasn't sure. The partial bond she'd left Keel with functioned, kept his pack stable, but she felt his pain through it every day. A constant low-level ache that whispered she could end his suffering with a thought. I'll grant the visit, she decided, but here, at the sanctuary, with you present. Whatever you need? A commotion near the sanctuary entrance drew their attention. A vehicle arriving, and from it emerged a young girl, barely 16, with wild eyes and torn clothes. She stumbled into the clearing, looking around frantically until her gaze landed on Ilara. Bond keeper! The word came out desperate. Please, I need help. My alpha, he... She choked on the words, tears streaming down her face. Ilara was moving before conscious thought, crossing the distance quickly. She placed gentle hands on the girl's shoulders. You're safe now. What's your name? Lissa. I was from Stormridge Pack. But my alpha, Garrett, he's been... She couldn't finish, but the bruises on her arms and the terror in her eyes said enough. Rage, cold and controlled, flooded through Ilara. Another alpha abusing his position, another child suffering because power had gone unchecked for too long. You're under my protection now, Ilara said firmly. She placed her palm against Lissa's shoulder, and silver light flowed from her hand. A mark appeared on the girl's skin, simple but unmistakable, a bond-keeper's protection seal. Any alpha who touched this girl now would feel Ilara's wrath instantly through their bond. Lissa's expression crumbled, relief overwhelming her. She threw her arms around Ilara and sobbed into her shoulder, while Ilara held her and felt her own resolve harden. Seraphina appeared, drawn by the commotion. The former Luna of Shadowcrest had found purpose at the sanctuary, helping other survivors heal from what they'd endured. She took Lissa gently, leading her toward the healing center while speaking in low, comforting tones. Dominic moved to Ilara's side, his jaw tight. Garrett will come for her. Let him try. Ilara's voice was ice. He'll learn what it costs to hurt children. She returned to the altar and reached out through the bonds, searching for Garrett's thread. Found it. Healthy, strong, completely unaware of the reckoning heading his way. Alpha Garrett, she sent through the connection. This is Ilara Coy, bondkeeper of the Bloodline altar. You have 3 days to present yourself at the sanctuary. Come willingly, or I will sever your bond and drag you here myself. She felt his shock, then his anger, then his fear as he realized she wasn't making empty threats. The next 3 days were tense. Ilara spent them preparing, gathering information from Lissa about the abuse, documenting everything carefully. This would be public, a clear demonstration of what happened when alphas violated their position. Garrett arrived exactly when ordered, flanked by his strongest betas, clearly believing he could talk his way out of consequences. He was wrong. The confrontation unfolded before witnesses, other alphas, sanctuary residents, pack members who'd traveled to see justice served. Ilara laid out the evidence methodically, gave Garrett multiple chances to confess, and when he continued lying, she made him feel the truth through his own bond. Then she stripped his alpha power away. The process was agonizing to watch, Garrett collapsing, screaming as centuries of accumulated authority was pulled from his very soul. Ilara transferred it to his strongest beta, Marcus Thorne, elevating him to alpha and ensuring Stormridge Pack would survive the transition. Garrett was exiled, reduced to a standard pack member, marked as someone who'd lost everything for abusing the helpless. The message rippled across all territories. The Bondkeeper's mercy has limits. After, when the crowd had dispersed and Garrett had been dragged away, Ilara sat at the altar's base and felt the weight of what she'd done. She'd destroyed a man today, ended his entire existence as he'd known it. It was justice. It was necessary. It still felt like dying inside. Dominic found her there, sat beside her without speaking for a long moment. Finally, "You did the right thing." Did I? Or did I just prove that power corrupts everyone eventually, even the ones trying to use it for good? You protected a child. You removed a predator from a position of authority. That's not corruption. That's exactly what power should do. He turned to face her. But I understand why it feels terrible. Taking someone's power, even when they deserve it, is still destroying a life. You're allowed to feel that weight. I can feel the pack now, Ilara whispered. Stormridge territory. They're confused, scared, but also relieved. So many of them are relieved that Garrett's gone. How long was he hurting them? How many suffered while I was focused on other things? You can't save everyone immediately. You're one person trying to fix centuries of corruption. I'm not just one person. I'm a bondkeeper. I'm supposed to be able to do this. You are doing it. You're just discovering that doing the right thing doesn't always feel good. Dominic stood, offered his hand. Come on, Lissa is asking for you. She wants to thank you properly. Ilara let him pull her up, and they walked together to the healing center where Lissa waited. The girl's bruises were already fading under Mira's care, and her eyes held something they hadn't before. Hope. You saved me, Lissa said simply. Thank you. You saved yourself by being brave enough to run, Ilara replied. I just made sure you stayed safe. What happens now? Can I stay here? As long as you want. Or when you're ready, we'll find you a placement with a pack that will treat you properly. Your choice, always. The gratitude in Lissa's expression made the day's darkness worth carrying. As evening fell, Ilara returned to her quarters, a modest room in the main sanctuary building, simple but comfortable. She stripped off the blood-spattered robes from the confrontation, washed carefully, and dressed in clean ones. Then she stood at her window, looking out over the sanctuary, and allowed herself to feel everything she'd been holding back. The fear, the doubt, the crushing responsibility of knowing that thousands of lives depended on her decisions. The bone-deep exhaustion that came from being constantly connected to so many minds, so many emotions, so much pain and hope and desperation. She was 23 years old. 6 months ago, she'd been nothing, rejected, disposable, left to die. Now she was everything, and the weight of it was almost unbearable. A knock at her door. Dominic's voice. "Can I come in?" "Yes." He entered, carrying 2 cups of something that smelled like chamomile and honey. "Thought you might need this." "Thank you." She accepted the cup, sipped carefully. The warmth spread through her chest, easing tension she hadn't realized she'd been holding. They sat in silence, and for the first time all day, Ilara felt like she could breathe. "I'm terrified," she admitted quietly. "Every day I'm terrified I'll make the wrong choice, abuse my power, become exactly what I'm trying to prevent. The fact that you're terrified is what makes you trustworthy." Dominic set his cup down. "The alphas who never questioned themselves, who never doubted, they're the ones who became tyrants." "What if that's not enough? What if fear isn't enough to stop me from eventually—" "Then I'll stop you." His tone was absolute. "I'll call you out, challenge you, do whatever it takes to keep you honest. That's what allies are for." Ilara looked at him, really looked, and saw sincerity written in every line of his face. He meant it, would stand against her if necessary, even knowing it might cost him everything. "How did I get so lucky to have you as an advisor?" she asked. "Luck had nothing to do with it. I saw what you were becoming and chose to stand beside you." He smiled slightly. "Best decision I've made in decades." They finished their tea in comfortable silence, and when Dominic left, Ilara felt steadier. Not fixed. She'd probably never be entirely fixed after everything she'd been through, but stable enough to keep going. She lay down in her bed and reached out through the bonds one last time before sleep. Felt thousands of shifters across 12 territories, all connected through her, all depending on her to keep the balance. Felt Keel's constant ache, his desperate longing for redemption she couldn't give him. Felt Dominic's steady strength, his unwavering support. Felt Lissa sleeping peacefully for the first time in months, protected by marks that glowed silver on her skin. Hours of blood, silver, and unbreakable bonds. Ilara Coy, condemned, awakened, sovereign. Now standing at the edge of the world with the first alpha, the origin, the key. The web is cracking, the ice is singing, and Keel's riding north with everything to lose. Subscribe, like, comment your pack. Because the next moon rises, and the Bondkeeper's choice will break or bind the world. You don't want to miss the moment she decides who burns. I'll be waiting.